sitting with a gentleman who we met recently, and we had him on our show, Skywatchers Radio, and he makes bow ties cool again. Amazingly amazing, that bow tie. That is even more cooler. It has little UFOs on it. Oh, look at that.
You know, ready for this? I wanted to get one with a flying saucer on it, right? I wanted to have it, pretty cool. So you know where I had to get this?
Where?
This is handmade from England and sent over so that they would get it here in time.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Now we're talking to Rich Hoffman here, and Rich is the State Director of Strategic Projects and a speaker for Mufon. He's the State Director for Mufon. Rich, you're in the Alabama chapter. How did you get involved with Mufon originally? How long have you been involved with Mufon? And, you have a lot of ribbons there, benefactor, speaker. I'm sure you're a very busy man with Mufon. How did this all happen for you?
Okay, so I've been with Mufon since it started. Okay? I'm one of the originals. Okay? It was not even called the Mutual UFO Network. It was called the Midwest UFO Network. And this goes back to 1969. Okay? I got started in UFOs in 1964. So this is my 52nd year of ufology. And it's, my 47th year of Mufon. And this is the first time in all those years that I get to present at the conference. The last one I had, the last one that I actually was up on stage for, I was the moderator, and I was introducing in Dayton, Ohio, and I had the conference up there in Dayton, Ohio, and we rented out the entire Dayton Convention Center. We had 3,500 people that came to that. That's how many people in that came at that. That's how popular the UFO subject was, okay? And so, tremendous number of people that came to that. And I was introducing Dr. J. Allen Hynek. I got to introduce all Leonard Stringfield, and I had Donald Kehoe. These are major people in the field. That was the attractors as well to come to the conference. Anyway, it was incredible what an experience that was. But I mean, this one was. Now I get to present, and that was pretty cool. I like that.
I've noticed this, in the last 8 years that I've been on the radio and interviewing folks. It seems like the popularity with ufology kind of goes and comes. It's like a wave, where some decades are more popular than others, and there's a period where nobody really talks about it or they don't care about it, and then something happens where it sparks the interest again, or there's a major motion picture that comes out that sparks that interest again, and then you have this amazing amount of folks that are into the subject, and I'm sure your conferences get packed because of it. Right now we're kind of in a slower period, I think, because we haven't had many things happen, but we just had NASA discover an Earth-like planet, which I think is going to spark interest once again into the subject. Is that an accurate statement for myself?
Yeah, it's very accurate. I think, the subject is one of those things that again, it's wanes and things like that, like, even TV shows, like you say, can trigger interest again. And we get, for example, even reports are that way. Last year and the year before, we had Hangar 1 that was on History Channel, right? Okay, well, guess what? That introduced a lot of people to MUFON, and then guess what happened to our case counts? They were out the door. I mean, we literally were like, we couldn't even keep up with them. And it's like, where we used to get maybe 20 to 40 a day, now we're getting about 200 to 300 a day. And so that was coming in, and it was like, wow, that surge. And the majority of those were cases where people were remembering back. Something triggered, they saw the show, and it triggered a memory that they had about something that they had seen. And so we've got a lot of cases where, well, back in 1964, and of course that's what we got a lot of, it's like people were telling their story. Well, when I was 2 years old, and then all this other stuff, right?
I have great memory at 2 years old, by the way.
Exactly, yeah. I saw this orb. It happened to be a toy or a pinky shape, and a toy shaped, Anyway, but you get what I'm saying, right? I mean, so you get that kind of thing, and then even the case that I talked about, which is the Aguadilla case, and we talked about late at night, was that Puerto Rico case, right? I mean, that's the kind of case, you might have a case that crops up like that, where it creates a lot of interest. I had a lot of people here. Well, example, I was on the TV show, Univision TV show, which is going to be doing a major feature on just that case. And I had a lot of people that came here just to hear that case. So again, you can find things that are of interest to them, and they'll come into it. But anyway, it's a great subject. We need to have more continuance on it, and we need to have more focus on it. So the fact that you're talking about it, that makes it all good.
Talk a little bit about that case. I mean, because I thought it was really fascinating when we had you on the show, and it was your topic for Mufon. So let's get into the details of it a little bit.
It's an exciting case. It was very unusual, but okay, so let's set the stage. This is the year 2013, so it's not that long ago. It's April 25th, and it's about 9 o'clock in the evening, right? So it's dark. But it's not too dark, but guess what's in the south is a full moon that's hanging up there at about 30 degrees above the horizon, right? So it's kind of brilliant from the standpoint of the moon being out, right? So anyway, what happens? At about 9 o'clock, you start to have over about 42 hits on radar just off the coast in the northwest part of the state, or in the country. At this airport, it's called the Rafael Hernandez Airport. It's right along the coastline. And so just to the northwest, only about a mile or 2 miles out at the max, is where all these like radar pings are happening. And they're moving around. One, for example, you can measure, it went from this point to this point, and it was 1,700 miles an hour. Okay? And so it was changing its speed. We were able to measure the speed of where it was based upon the fact that every 10 seconds or so, the screen is going around, right? You see a ping, ping, that type of thing. So we could do some measurements on that, which we did. Anyway, so about that right there triggers a concern. We have something that's out there that there's no transponder code being identified. So what is it? And so we believe what happened, and we can't get confirmation on it, but we believe that the control tower actually saw those pings going on. But what happened was that they held up some sort of a plane from its departure. We're not sure, but there was a FedEx plane that was on the runway that was supposed to take off at about 9:10, which didn't. And then, interesting enough, Homeland Security was taking off right at that same time, and they must have released them because they have a mission to accomplish, right? They're out looking for drug smugglers, and they've got a mission. So they usually get the clearance and the benefit to be able to go and to get out there, okay? It's a military engagement, so we can let them go. So they got up. As soon as they got up to a point where they took off from the airport, they start to get up in the air. They look over to the left, toward the north, in that general direction where the pings were, and they see a pinkish red light that's now moving southward toward the actual airport. And then, so they're concerned, like, I didn't expect to see that, and why did you didn't tell me about this air traffic that's up there, right? Yeah, so they're a little bit concerned from that pilot standpoint, right? It's my crew. And so now they're curious. Okay, so they swing around and they start to make a circle. They called the control tower. The control tower says, yeah, we see that pink light too. Yeah, we're tracking it. We know what it is. We don't know what it is, but we see it, right? And so now it's coming toward the airport. That Customs and Border Protection aircraft with a flight crew of 4 people. There's a pilot, co-pilot. There's a radar, as well as thermal imaging guys on the inside of it, or gals, or whatever. And they're on the inside. And so bottom line is that they keep watching the light. Suddenly, after a period of time, the light goes out. And they're saying, okay, this could be a drug smuggling operation, right? So now they have heightened interest, in what this thing is. So instead of circling and going on their mission, they now turn on their thermal imaging camera and begin recording that object at night. They can see it. It looks like daylight, but it's at night, 9 o'clock. And now you're seeing the heat image, the thermal image. So they're watching this thing now and tracking it, and they basically now make another loop around the object where it is, a tighter loop around the airport, and they're watching it, and they can see it come around. They see it. It appears to be going around the runway. Not that, it's like maybe 400 feet altitude, but the actual ground level below them on the airport is about 200 feet. So there's only a 200-foot clearance above ground, right? So it's relatively low, right? So they're watching it, and it's just unusual because there's no like the thermal signature's wrong. It's not like an aircraft. It's more of an oval or an acorn kind of shaped object, if you would. So it doesn't have any of the thermal signature that you expect from an aircraft, right? So wait a minute, this isn't an aircraft. We're gonna keep watching it. So they circle around as long as they can. At which point the object now starts to go and appears to descend down toward the water line, back at the northern position, roughly about where it came in at, and then it goes into the water at about 100 miles an hour. And now it slows down a little bit. And so now it's moving underwater at about 85 to 90 miles an hour. Yeah. And, and then what we see, you can actually watch on the image. You can see it going along the coastline because it's now made a course change. And it's going along the coastline. And you see it moving that way. And then you can actually see what we describe to be as a Bernoulli hump. Let me explain what that is. And that is that if you take an object like even a submarine, it displaces the water. The water goes around, right? You're with me, right? And so what happens is if it's right near the surface, you'll actually get the waves of the water line. It'll bubble up, and you'll have a hump. We call it a Bernoulli hump. And Lockheed Martin talks about that. That's a way for them to detect subs sometimes. So there's a displacement of the water up. That's what happened here. And you're seeing it on the thermal image, despite the fact that it's underwater. And now it comes up out of the water, and then it appears to darken, and it starts to get bigger, and it splits into two identical objects. And now you have two identical objects that are moving at about the same speed, and they start separating in the water. Okay. So one by one, they each suddenly disappear into the water. Now the border people are going like nuts. What did they just see? They're scanning and zooming in, trying to see if they can find it anymore. It's completely gone. It's not to be seen. So they say, okay, well, we got to head on with our mission because we've just delayed doing this when we're supposed to be going and doing something for the taxpayers' money, right? So bottom line is that they had to skedaddle and get on their mission. Well, eventually, over a period of time, they eventually, and this is like about a month later, one of the women that lives in this area that we all know is a field investigator and a writer and author. She somehow gets contacted about the fact of this video. And it turns out that another pilot has got a copy. Okay? So we now talked to this person and said, well, how can we learn more? What can we do? And we turned out that this person said, well, we're willing to cooperate with you to share what we've got, but you all have to sign non-disclosure agreements. And oh, by the way, we're going to control this to the point where it's down to the point where we're very concerned about it not going through the UFO channels, but we'd like to see it go through scientific channels. Are you with me? Well, I mean, they want to see it treated seriously, and so it's fair. And so we all, a team of 6 of us, signed non-disclosures. We wouldn't say anything. We can't tell who the name is. In fact, we saw that later on that there were postings about it, and we still couldn't talk about it, so you wouldn't see us comment and stuff like that. We tried to, and then we began, forming a team, and we got physicists, chemists, and mathematicians, and all this. We pulled this team together, and we began analyzing the video, right? And we had to first confirm, is it really Homeland Security video, okay? You know as well as I do, people fake stuff nowadays, right? So is this a real video? Is it really? So the bottom line was we had to get radar. So guess what? We got radar. We went and put a FOIA request through, got FAA to deliver off some radar. We started looking at it, and then we could actually watch on radar that this plane, who has a transponder code that is delegated to military, he's leaving at a certain time, which, by the way, when you look at the video, you see all these like date, time, and everything, and GPS coordinates and all that stuff, it all matched the radar. Now you've confirmed it indeed was that, right? So is this a fake video? I mean, could they have been faking? Is this, the government wanting to, throw a whatever? Okay, so now we're breaking that video into 7,027 frames and analyzing 7,027 frames. Looking at every aspect of that video to see if it, and then also to determine if it went behind any reference points or things like that where we could use to determine size, position, distance, and all that stuff to match it. Okay, so it goes behind, for example, a telephone pole. That's an indication of the distance. You could actually measure the plane. So we were able to do it. So we were able to make a lot of determinations about its flight path, its speed, based upon analysis of individual pixels. I mean, I'm talking about, down to the small level of the photo being pixels. So that's what we did. We spent 2 years analyzing it. We put a 162-page paper together. It's a scientific paper. And we published it, got the word out, and that's why you have me here talking right now.
That is an incredible story. And it leads me to a follow-up question. How many UFO reports have you come across that deal with UFOs going into the ocean, coming out of the ocean, the ISOs, as they're called now, or USOs, I'm sorry, undersea objects. They're becoming more and more relevant in ufology as more and more people are seeing them leave the ocean, especially military folks have reported a lot of these things. In your research, especially dealing with this case in particular, have you found that to be a common thread now within a lot of the reports coming out?
There is a common thread. We get there's a lot of cases about that. But you have to understand, too. So let me give you an example. We had a situation where somebody delivered a presentation today. They were talking about a number of cases in this state or in this county or in that county. We don't do a good job of laying out lines in the ocean. So, okay, isn't that a valid point, right? I mean, so which part of the 3/4 of the planet did you see this? Is hard to say. And so now you're trying to quantify, and you have no boundaries to know where that is. And then the other part of that is, okay, so you're on a ship, and you see this thing. You're on a cruise ship. Do you know where you were? No. I've got no idea. So you see the level of problems we have with U.S. So we get a lot of people that say, I'm looking off from the shoreline at Mobile Beach, and I saw something moving under the water. Okay, that's a helpful thing, right? So that gives you a little bit more proximity. You've kind of got a good location, and you can do that. So you have that. But let me also clarify that, in the Air Force, when they did their study from 1947, when they got started with all those different projects that they had, and they terminated in the year 1969, that they only got 12,000 reports, which is ridiculous, because what that tells me is it's a situation where most people don't want to report. And who in the world is going to call up the government and tell them, oh, I saw something, right? Okay, so they have a very small population. But they weren't even getting the Navy objects. None of the Navy reports or the Navy sightings ever went to the Air Force. Well, I think largely because the Air Force was out collecting the things in the air. But, the other part of it is that there were things that were seen, and the Navy and the Air Force necessarily weren't that cooperative. But the Navy, the Air Force was always concerned about the UFO subject from the standpoint of, how can I tell you that you're paying me tax money to do something, and I'm not in control of the airspace? Okay? So from a security standpoint, the Air Force is definitely wanting to make sure that it can let people know that it's doing their job, right? It's doing their job. Well, nobody was ever questioning the Navy. Are you in control of the waters? No, nobody did that. I mean, so there was no place for you to report them, and so they didn't do it, and they didn't have to play. But years later, now we're going and looking through records, and we're finding out that there was a lot of those things, and You can find paperwork and some other things when you go from a Freedom of Information request. You can get that. Interestingly enough, the Russians actually released over 15,000 cases of USO types of things. And then the other part of the problem that we had with even the Aguadilla case is that you don't call it a UFO. I mean, our terminology is just horrible because this was not an unidentified flying object. If you think about it, it was underwater at the same time, right? So is it a UFO or a USO? Or is it both? I mean, you get what I'm saying, right? So, exactly. So we decided on our report to call it unidentified anomalous phenomena. Because, first off, what kind of phenomena it's anomalous because anybody ever seen anything split into two? Not that I've ever seen, and it's a phenomena of some sort. We really couldn't identify what it was. We tried to do the study and say it's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's not Superman, that type of thing. Okay. So then, what are you left with? You're left with an unknown, and that's what UFO investigation is about. You always go and you try to work what they call it de-escalation of hypotheses. You start off with what's the known part? Does it match any of that? And if it doesn't match any of that, then you're left with the unknown.
You mean basically best case what it could be, worst case what it couldn't be?
That's another way of looking at it. But what we typically try to do is, again, so many of the things that are reported are really IFOs. People misperceiving the planet Venus, Jupiter. We get drones now. Oh my God! People are like, well, you got one on your desk. So it's like So, and I even got a guy in Huntsville that he didn't know it. He's a security guy fixing my security system. And he said, well, we got to talk, and what's your interest? Oh, well, I like to fly drones. Really? You do? I said, really? He said, yeah, I've got one that I put together that I built a frame around it, and I've got it so it has rotating lights, and I'm going to send it up and see what happens when I send it to UFO. And he didn't even know who he was talking to. So I'm looking over and saying, man, could you let me know when you do that? And where you're going to do? So you get what I'm saying, right? People are out there actually, using them and trying to, they want to create reports, and they want to have a little fun with it. And I understand that, but man, it just makes it harder for us to be able to do our job of getting to the real UFO, right?
Not only that, you have the drones, that are heavily used now by a lot of folks, but CGI has gotten so much easier to fake stuff on video. It is getting harder and harder to really tell what's real and what's fake. Back in the 80s and 90s, if a video came out, chances are it was real. It was very hard for anybody to fake this stuff. Now, any 12 or 13-year-old with the right software and a nice computer in their mom's house or their basement, they can do whatever they want. We were talking to Alejandro Rojas earlier about websites like Secure Team, Third Phase of Moon, and how a lot of these folks are clearly hoaxing this stuff for money from YouTube revenue and stuff like that. And it's a shame because it really tarnishes ufology and it makes it harder to be taken serious, which is, I'm sure, something that Mufon has been for years and decades now trying to make this more serious subject where the mainstream media doesn't pick it up and laugh at it as they normally do, and it becomes that giggle factor that still is involved in the whole spectrum of ufology.
Yeah, and let me also just inject, and we talked about this weekend as well, but you have to understand that the CIA is in there also playing and controlling some of the media, and we have actually people out influencing and trying to create disinformation to create disinterestedness. Now, you have to understand that, and that goes way back to the 1953 Robertson panel report, where the CIA led a meeting and basically told the Air Force to debunk UFO sightings when possible. That was their message. And they were going to use the media at that time to be able to educate the public and calm them down and make them think that this is all a bunch of stuff. And then what you had was the CIA-backed tabloids to show up on your countertops with, Miss Clinton holding a baby, shaking a hand on an alien baby, or any kind of presidential leaders doing that, and exactly. And where were those positioned? Right at the checkout counter when you're going to go out and buy your food, right? Conveniently positioned so you'll see that kind of crap, right? So ultimately, what you got is it's almost like propaganda in many respects, and we're just being led down the merry away from the UFO, right? So the government or whoever's doing this, that's controlling this, if it's a CIA-backed thing, is doing a great job of dispelling that and creating that havoc. At the same time, it's challenging because we want to get more serious people, and we have to re-educate them away from all the tabloid trap that they've had, and hopefully get them in the door so that they can hear that there's somebody treating it seriously.
Rich, can you go into a little bit about what you're doing as the Director of Strategic Projects? Because it sounds very fun.
Sounds like a hoot, right?
It's a hoot. No, I'm doing hoots. Seriously. So it's Director of Strategic Projects. Well, what the heck does that mean? Okay, so bottom line is that I've had this long desire to be able to increase our technology out in the field. Okay. To me, the situation is we have a database filled with 70,000 sightings right now. How many do we need? Another 70,000? Do we need another 30,000? When I come and I talk to you and you tell me that you saw one back in 1964, that's great. How good is your memory? Okay. Can you give me the date? Can you give me the time? Can you allow? And there's not. Exactly. You can't do that, right? So guess what? It just, it's a nice story. We chuck it away, and it's about the best we can do, right? And even most recent ones, it's like 3 days old. The object is gone. Now you're doing this paperwork search. You're trying to see if you can find people to corroborate. It's not a good way of doing business, right? So we've got to do something like getting your technology out in the field to be able to have it help us out. For example, you can imagine if I had that Aguadilla FLIR, that thermal imaging camera, and if I had that capable and I could use it, what could I possibly be getting that's going to help me? So the idea here is if we can come up with passive radar, we can use that. We can have infrared cameras. We can have a whole host of these. And guess what? That technology is getting cheaper. It's more affordable now. I can, on my phone, I can actually get a FLIR camera, and I can see infrared on my phone and record it. There's a whole host of those kind of technologies that are coming out. And so we need to embrace using that and making that accessible. Because I believe right now, I don't need the visual spectrum. I need the infrared and the ultraviolet and other kinds of parts of the electromagnetic spectrum to get better data. And, what is the heat signature of that object like we're talking about? Can I see beings through the craft? Their heat signatures. Do we know that? We don't know that, So if we get that kind of stuff and we can position it out in hot spots, you get what I'm saying? Now we can do something, right? And so we've got 3 different projects that are going on right now, and we brought them together the other night to get them to all talk to each other that are doing something similar with cameras and all that other stuff. And the other encouraging thing is, guess who's helping to fund it? Dr. Stephen Hawking. Okay? Yeah, I heard an ooh from everybody here at the table, right? Yeah, it's an ooh, right? At the same time, guess who else is helping? Companies. We've even got some politicians that are helping. So, and guess who's leading the overall project of one of the projects? No, did you ever hear of Douglas Trumbull? The guy who made all the special effects in Close Encounters and 2001: A Space Odyssey and some of these other movies? Well, he's had a long fascination and interest in UFOs, and he's exactly, and so he's been wanting to develop that and have that, to help us out. So, guess that's pretty neat stuff, right? So that's where we're at.
Now, since you brought it up, you're getting now people who are more interested in kind of helping fund these things, such as politicians and companies. 2 questions then. Are you taking steps to ensure that you remain in control of the research even though you're taking their money? And number 2, are you worried about, those CIA disinformation guys coming in and trying to screw with your research?
Excellent question. Yeah. And so this is where you have to develop what they call memorandums of agreement. And we do this in the DoD world, right? If we're going to build a weapon system, and you're Boeing and you're Lockheed. We need an agreement between the two of you of that we're going to cooperate, we're going to share, we're going to do this, and we're going to be okay, right? So that's you get that agreement and you specify and put these things down. So this is what you're going to do. This is what and so we're developing the MOA to get people to agree about that. Secondly, there will likely be an interest on the part of the DoD. Okay, and I think on one of the projects, I think that's already been expressed. So now we're carefully looking at that, and there would have to be another memorandum of agreement with them. It's going to be our data, it's going to be our information, and so the same thing you do for building a weapon system, you're going to do here. And we are going to retain control of it. We are not giving up anything in terms of that, okay? The objects or whatever we have in terms of the cameras and things we deploy will be based upon us determining where and us putting in those cameras and sustaining them. Okay? So we Mufon will be in control of that. So excellent question. And we're certainly not letting the IAs and those other three named organizations get to the alphabet soup. Yeah. Okay?
Speaking of Mufon, where are you going to be next? Where's Mufon going to have a next conference that the audience might want to go to?
Next year's conference is now going to be in Las Vegas. So we're heading to Las Vegas next year. Yeah, we're going Vegas. Yeah, Viva Las Vegas. No, so anyway, we can all do Elvis impersonations or something. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to be in Vegas next year, and I'm not sure yet exactly what the they're usually like at the same time frame, August and then we've had some who moved back to September as well, because and that's also been advantageous from the standpoint of the heat, or something like that. So I'm not sure yet when, but I'm told that it's going to be out in Vegas next year.
Now, if anybody wanted to get involved in Mufon, how hard is it for them to get involved and become maybe a field operator? One day, maybe become a state director in their own state. What's the process like?
Well, first off, it's pretty simple to become a member of Mufon. All you got to do is go to mufon.com, and then it says, you want to join? Sure, yeah. You can go up, and you can determine what you want to be on even that level. There's I think the $35 is the only thing that's just a fee to become a member, right? I mean, that's like cheaper than the price of a Starbucks coffee once a month. I mean, it's like so it's like okay, well, that's that. Okay. And then there are a whole bunch of other. By the way, there's a whole bunch of other ways to volunteer to be in other roles, independent of being a field investigator. We have a whole lot of other needs we're looking for, and in fact, in the journal we publish at the back of it a whole bunch of other ways of journal and all kinds of other kinds of things, in the media world, and we're looking for. So there's a lot of support outside of just you being a field investigator. Point up front. Field investigators are our mainstay because that's where we're trying to be able to, validate that somebody's story is maybe legit and it's not off the deep end, and that we have a good case, and determine if it's a balloon, it's a kite, or it's really a UFO, right? So we're trying to separate that out, which we're the only organization that does that. The rest of them just take all these reports, so it's maybe a bird, maybe a kite, and you have nobody out there that checked it out, and so now you're saying that I got 20 kite reports this month. Well, I'm not interested in that, right? I want to know about UFOs. I'm not interested in kites, birds, plane, anything else, right? So you get where I'm going right there. Okay, so field investigators, there's also a place on mufon.com where it says, you want to become a field investigator, and it talks about what that is. At the same time, then after you become a member, you can then get that, you can do, in fact, they have ways for you to purchase basically a membership along with, and it's bundled in with the field investigator. So you get the field investigator's kit, and basically what that amounts to is that you get this big, thick manual that we've developed over the 47 years and we improved on. And so suddenly I have the original field investigator's manual, which was maybe about 10 pages, right? This one's like about 600 pages. I mean, but it teaches you everything, you know what I'm saying, right? And it's grown over the years. As we've improved on it, yeah, exactly. So now it's bigger, thicker, and you can actually go in and read that. And then we have a MUFON University. online Mufon University. So you go in, you can take your test online, and you then get a certificate that says you completed the test, you passed the test, you're now certified. So now, let's say you did that in Alabama. All right? I get the message as the state director that you've come on board. And I'm saying, hey, great. Like nice to have you. Let's make you a field investigator trainee, and we'll work with you then on your case in terms of doing a case, what that's involved, make sure you have your access, helping give you other additional pieces of information, like what the reports are, how to fill out this and how to do that, and then give you some basic case handling steps and some other kinds of great information. And then we just work with you on a single case and see how you do, help you out, give you feedback, and then over a period of time, then you start to now work cases on your own. So, you have to understand that I've been so long, so I'm up to thousands in terms of the number of cases I've been doing, right? So thousands. And but anyway, as you progress up, and you can start to decide, there's other roles like state section director. You might be a good one that might want to be able to help us to create a chapter or people down in a given area, and great. We'd then help you to get, presenters and everything else to be able to help develop that, because we're about expanding, and I've got even portions of my state right now that I haven't got investigators, so I have to have people, help me out from distances, and we work cooperatively together that way. So ultimately, it's a situation we do the best we can. We need to grow. We're up at maybe about 3,000 field investigators, something worldwide, or members worldwide. But about, I would guesstimate that it's somewhere in the thousands, in terms of the number of field investigators around the world. And we're growing internationally as well. Our challenge has been to get the manuals translated into different languages, but we're doing that. We're getting that out. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So that's kind of like where we're going. And this Mufon University is pretty awesome because it's actually got a lot of great courses in it.
To be a member of Mufon, is a belief in UFOs required? Like, what about the more skeptics who have maybe a more like scientific interest, or those left brain thinkers who are really just in it for maybe a different reason than someone who's like, yes, UFOs, ETs, that sort of thing? Would you encourage those type of people to get involved with the organization as well?
Yeah. Simple answer is yes. I think there's a lot of people that have sightings that then become MUFON investigators. Then there's some people like me who's never seen one. Okay? I've never seen one, but I've been out there investigating because I had this curiosity as a 13-year-old that I want to be able to check into it. And we have a lot of people that get started at that young age that are passionate about this and want to do something. So there's a whole host of beliefs about this. It's almost an evangelic in terms of the wide variety of religions that are out there of ufology, right? So, and I just look at it and I say, okay, well, I guess that's just the nature of what it is. But ours is supposed to be, MUFON is focused on the scientific study for the benefit of humanity. That's our mission statement, right? And we are trying to do everything we can to get science on board. And so, like, we have right now in Alabama, I've been able to bring on one person who is on the Science and Review Board for University of Alabama, Huntsville. He's a professor. And we're engaging that community. So we've got to be able to do scientific research. Over my period of my life with this, I've gone through all those different phases, from a skeptic to a scoffer to a believer type thing, And the other part of that is, even as a field investigator, I've got to be a skeptic. You can't walk in and just be gullible and buy everything that everybody says. Okay? You don't do that. And so, I'm not saying that they're not, maybe, if that's what they believe, that's great, okay? I'm not saying it, but my point is that you and I know people tell lies. And you and I know that there's people out there that have psychological problems. And you and I know that there's these whole group of people out there that are like that. And so consequently, what you're trying to do is to separate the sense from the nonsense. Again, going back to what's the sense here. And so you need to be skeptical, but like I said, from a standpoint, and you want to also see, is there any science that I can get out of that thing? So we look for investigators to tend to hopefully be more of that objective, impartial, kind of like on a criminal case. Hi, you're guilty. No, I'm sorry, you're guilty. I don't want that. You have the impartial, objective person like you have on a criminal case. I want, my due fair share. So that's what we look for. Does that help? Okay.
Rich, thank you so much for taking part here at Skywatchers Radio with us. And as always, you're a fascinating person to speak to. And we hope to have you on the show again soon on a regular basis and promote, the conventions and symposiums and anything else that you're working on. Do you have a website you can give the audience besides Mufon.com, obviously, that they can go on and maybe follow you directly?
We're right now transitioning our Alabama website over from another vendor, so it's a situation where that's not a good place to go. But I guess the best thing I can tell you right now is I do a lot on Facebook. I'm up there on Facebook right now. You can see me pinging. I have an Alabama Facebook page that I'm constantly banging all the time. I am also the admin for like 20 other MUFON kinds of Facebook pages. We have everything from field investigators only to state directors, that type of thing, so that they can all collaborate and get together and discuss things too. So I'm definitely on Facebook. I mean, I'm there for that for right now, anyway, until I get the website and all that stuff like that taken. But and then of course, my email. You can get a hold of me. I use this little thing that I used for my license plate. It's called UFO XPRT, or a little play on UFO expert, just to see what it pings, and it fits on the license plate kind of nice, right? In the car. And man, I get some people saying, hey, you're pulling in for gas. I want to hear about what you're doing. So it triggers that kind of, it helps, right? And that's what I use. So it's ufoexpert@gmail.com. So, get a hold of me. I'm easy to talk to, as you can pretty well tell.
No kidding. I mean, I've talked to a lot of folks, and you're definitely one of the most approachable, nicest individuals in ufology that I've met so far. It's an honor to know you and meet you in person finally, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Rich Hoffman, everybody.